Thanks.
So good.
Thank you. Good afternoon. What a warm welcome. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mayor Patterson, for the kind welcome. Thank you, Mayor Sander, NLC President, for welcoming us here and for the work that you do. Thank you to Clarence Anthony, who I first got to know back in my own mayor days. Thank you to the whole NLC team, the staff, everyone who puts this on as you work to support cities and towns across America every day. And a big congratulations for 100 years of service here at the NLC. I enjoy thinking about how much has changed in 100 years. Just in my realm of transportation, 100 years ago, that's right around when automobiles were replacing horses at the mainstream of American surface transportation. Commercial aviation barely existed. We didn't have to worry too much about distracted driving because we didn't have devices. And actually, DUIs were theoretically not much of a problem because prohibition was going on at the time. So a lot's changed. But a lot is the same, including the importance of America's communities and organizations like NLC that give them a hearing in Washington. That's why I'm pleased to be here. I really feel at home more than anywhere else when I'm among America's local leaders. Back when I was mayor, I believed that local government was the most dynamic, difficult, and rewarding venue for public service. Before I came to Washington, I believed that to be true. Now that I'm in Washington, I know that to be true. Don't get me wrong, I love the work that I get to do on President Biden's behalf and yours. Before coming out here, my former public works director back home told me that I was about to become like the trim rudder on a supertanker, moving a big apparatus one nudge at a time, which is sometimes how it feels. It's an enormous privilege to be building the future and to be working at such a large scale. But even now, working in this department and operating across this country, I know that the truest meaning of our work is closer to home. And the truest measure, I believe, of our success as an administration is whether we're making your work as local leaders a little bit easier. Certainly would have made my life a little easier back in South Bend if there had been a president launching a $1.2 trillion infrastructure initiative at the time. So we're pretty excited about that. I'll say more about that work in a moment, but I do also want to say in all humility that I know from experience that even the most generous federal programs and processes are not always the easiest to navigate for America's communities. And I want you to know that we're working to change that on everything from paperwork and environmental processes to matching funding to make sure that we are a user-friendly U.S. DOT for America's cities and towns of all sizes. We understand the capacity restraints that every city and certainly smaller communities face. So we have expanded our local technical assistance programs in every state. We've relaunched our tribal technical assistance program. We stood up a new Center for Excellence on Project Delivery. And we're supporting dozens of communities with full-time capacity builders through our new Thriving Communities program. And I know NLC is doing excellent work on capacity building too. And we'll have a new round of awards to announce, by the way, on our Thriving Communities program very soon. You might want help navigating all of those new technical assistance resources too, help navigating. So we created DOT Navigator to do just that, bringing all of our application and project delivery assistance under one roof. We also streamlined the process of applying for and delivering projects for programs like our infra program, our mega projects program, and our rural surface transportation program. We bundled them into one application so you didn't have to fill out multiple, sometimes redundant bodies of paperwork. For the new electric vehicle charging program, we're using something called a categorical exclusion. Many of you veterans of NEPA know how helpful it can be to have a categorical exclusion. We're using that to expedite environmental approvals and start projects sooner. And for our new grant program to repair or replace unsafe gas pipelines, we did the upfront work on environmental reviews and streamlined the application, more of a yes/no template to cut red tape on projects that are a clear benefit for communities in the environment. And the results were, we saw small towns and cities who had never received federal funds before winning these grants to benefit their communities. We are here to make sure in literally the most concrete terms that you succeed. And we're here to try to shape the culture of this place, Washington, D.C., to better reflect what is greatest about America's communities. Back when I was running for president, I often said that we would be well served if we could get Washington to work a little more like America's best-run cities rather than the other way around. And we're working in that spirit in so many ways. So what I wanted to do with our brief time together is to share some examples of how we are following the lead of America's local leaders, especially when it comes to transportation, what that could mean for what you're trying to do, and what I think we can do together. I'll start with bipartisanship and nonpartisanship, because one of the things I love and honestly miss about the city level, especially important to highlight during a year like the year we're in, is that partisan considerations and loyalties don't dominate everything else that's going on at the local level. When I was a mayor, I know I was just as likely to form meaningful cooperative relationships with Republicans as with Democrats, without pretending to be any different politically or values-wise than I was. And for that matter, I was just as likely to be challenged by Democrats as Republicans. As you know, local issues don't always have a predictable left-right shape to them. And that's one of the reasons I love being at NLC, one of the few places where hundreds of senior elected officials from around the country gather without particularly caring, or in some cases even knowing, the partisan affiliation of the person sitting next to you. And you actually like each other, I can tell. That's a powerful thing right now. I'd be lying if I said we got anything close to that on a routine basis here in Washington, but I have been struck by how much of the work we're doing today is bipartisan or nonpartisan in its character. Starting with the very fact, of course, of the bipartisan infrastructure law, something we passed with your help and support. The number of Republicans who are willing to cross party lines and work with Democrats and work with President Biden and work with me and my cabinet colleagues to get it done was extraordinary, even though the idea of a bipartisan anything law was greeted with mockery when President Biden first took office. We can't even imagine not having that legislation now, and yet its obituary was written dozens of times in 2021 by people saying that the president was on a fool's errand trying to get bipartisan cooperation, only for it to happen in ways that are now bringing results to every part of the country, red, blue, and purple, and boy, is it delivering results. So I decided, in honor of your 100th anniversary, to give an address featuring 100 projects that we're very excited about. No? My team agreed. They suggested we trim things. So instead, we found another way to do it. What we're going to do is share just a few projects that are at least 100 years old, about the same as this organization that we're finally doing something about. And this is new territory for me. I don't usually do audio-visual presentations, but in honor of the occasion for NLC, we're going to try to get through this together. So. Starting with this one. All right, some folks recognize a certain bridge in the Pacific Northwest, I see. I-5 interstate bridge between Washington State and Oregon carries over 100,000 vehicles a day, including a lot of freight traffic, so it's important to your supply chains, even if you don't live anywhere near these communities. But one of the spans is more than 100 years old. Its original purpose was at a time when you had a lot of horses and cattle drives trying to get over the Columbia River. Definitely time for a replacement. The picture on the right shows that concrete counterweight of about 900 tons, which is really something when it's over your head as you're going onto that bridge. This is the gear house where they lift the bridge when a sailboat comes through. The new bridge will have no moving parts. But building that's expensive, which is why in December we were so excited to announce $600 million to help build a new replacement bridge that's going to serve people for decades to come. Green Bay, Wisconsin has, there we go, some fellow Midwesterners here. There is so much potential for new economic development across the entire Great Lakes region because of the proximity to major freight highways, railways, the St. Lawrence Seaway, which is a shipping route that can bring goods from the Midwest all the way out around the world. So we're helping to build the first new port terminal in Green Bay in almost 100 years. We're excited about what it means to get this off the drawing board, and there's the drawing board. At the Port of Long Beach, founded in 1911, we're adding on-dock rail capacity so that goods move more quickly and less pollution. Bringing the rails closer to the ships means that you don't have to wait as long for trucks to transfer them onto the rails. It sounds technical, but it can make all the difference in the world, especially when supply chains come under the kind of pressure that they did in 2021. In Chicago, we're updating tens of thousands of feet of track on a 100-year-old elevated freight rail line that runs through the city. In Baltimore, I think we're going to Baltimore next. This is bonus points for this one because it's not just 100 years old, it's 150 years old. I'm sorry, you know what? This one up here is in Pennsylvania. The next one's in Baltimore. Here's Baltimore. But if you happen to be anywhere near Pittston or West Pittston, we're excited about the bridge that we're fixing in Pennsylvania. But yeah, those all look like spring chickens compared to the Baltimore and Potomac tunnel in Maryland. It's 150 years old. It's in such disrepair, you can occasionally see a brick come off of its ceiling. And that causes the average rail commuter to lose 13 hours to delays every year. So we are going to help build the new Frederick Douglass Tunnel that is going to make trips more reliable and faster for millions of MARC and Amtrak riders up and down the Northeast Corridor. These are some of the cathedrals of our infrastructure, but not every great project has that many zeros in it. We've been on the road celebrating so many projects where maybe it's not $1 billion effort, maybe it's not 100 years old, but it has been an issue that the community has been trying to address and fix for decades or maybe even generations. Let me show you a video clip from a trip we took to Georgia, which helps make the point.
There is one sound heard too often here.
The train will come and stop there for hours and hours and hours.
It's quite the inconvenience.
So look at that, look at this right here.
A train stopped us in our tracks during this interview.
This train been sitting here how long? So what are they doing?
That's the decades-old question drivers in Millen keep asking.
It's no joke. And to sit there for an hour, you know, I have to pick my granddaughter up at, you know, from school, and if I'm late picking her up, panic sets in.
Panic and frustration all around.
Stay on that other side of town. You can't go home because you can't go across the tracks because it's blocking that off too.
But that could soon change.
$12 million. Merry Christmas.
Christmas came early in Millen, Georgia. We were out there celebrating a grant to fix that crossing, make it safer for people to get to where they need to go. North Dakota, you can see me here dodging gopher holes. We saw a railroad crossing near the University of Dakota that's been the site of dozens of crashes. Trains there block traffic for about 2.5 hours a day, and the community's first studies on how to deal with the issue date back 30 years. We're helping them get it done with a new underpass that's going to carry drivers and pedestrians safely and without delay. By the way, quick show of hands, how many of you would consider blocked crossings or other railroad crossing issues to be a significant concern in your community? Okay. Yeah. So that's why we push so hard to get this railroad crossing elimination program in, but I also want to make sure you know that the Federal Rail Administration is putting together a blocked crossing portal. We would like to hear your stories. Please take a moment to file them with us. I know what it means to be one of the few people who seems to be able to get their calls returned by a railroad, and I want to put that to work for you. So let us know when you're having issues. So that's railroads in North Dakota. Let me tell you something about airports in South Dakota. This is an airport. Chamberlain, South Dakota has about 2,600 people. You might be surprised to know that they have an airport, but it's a really important one because of the air ambulance missions that take off from there almost on a daily basis. And yet, if you look at their terminal, just to be clear, that double wide, in this little blurry in the middle, that manufactured house there, that's their general aviation terminal. They've done a great job, but we think they ought to have an actual permanent building. So we're building them one. That's what you see on the left. We know that is going to help with service for those medevac flights and the crop dusters and the local tourism that depends on people flying in to hunt there in South Dakota. I will spare you the other 44,990 projects that are underway. But every part of the country is seeing these historic federal investments. And there is much more where this came from. So thank you for bringing us the good ideas about the projects that need to get done. Because one thing that all of those 45,000 projects have in common, not one of them was cooked up at the U.S. Department of Transportation headquarters. We don't invent the projects, we support them. I always said, something else I always said, even back when I was running for president, is, the great ideas aren't necessarily always going to come from Washington, but more of the funding should. And that's what President Biden's infrastructure package is doing for America's communities. I want to mention another thing that I appreciate and sometimes miss about local government. It's the relentless and unmistakable focus on reality, on facts, on data. It can't be ignored because local government, local leadership is just rooted in reality because you're held accountable for it, whether you're on local media or whether you're at the grocery store. Don't get me wrong, I know that you deal with rumor and misinformation at every level, but in my experience, the truth is never that far away. When you're in charge of the city, if there's a hole in the road and someone calls you on it, you don't get to say that's fake news. People know the hole is there in the road, right? And they want to know what you're going to do to fix it. That's why we're trying to get you more and more of that funding, and we've got to find ways to similarly ground our work at the national level. That's what we're trying to do at DOT. Look at the evidence, look at the numbers, look at the facts, good, bad, or indifferent, so that we can see how we're doing toward our goal of leaving each form of transportation better than we found it. We're following the facts. And a lot of those facts are encouraging. On supply chains, for example, Pacific shipping rates down by about 75% from their extreme peak during the pandemic. And by the way, following events in the Red Sea, we've been in close touch with carriers and the DoD to deal with threats there. Thanks to the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, American companies now have more leverage against international shipping cartels, all of which leads to lower shipping costs, which in turn is part of the fight to lower inflation for the American people. We also know because of strong investment in transportation and infrastructure and construction and manufacturing that go with it, we have an extraordinary, by some measures, unprecedented period of economic growth underway right now. Unemployment below 4% for 2 years. That hasn't happened since before I was born. I know I'm young, but I'm not that young. It's a big deal that it's been more than 40 years since that's happened. Wage growth is accelerating. Wages, after everything that Americans faced with post-COVID inflation, wages are now going up faster than prices. Inflation is slowing. Prices for things like eggs or airline tickets are actually down. We've got a long way to go, but record job creation, household wealth creation, net worth of households are at a higher level even after inflation. Personal debt's getting lower. And we're even seeing the racial wealth gap after years of widening finally getting narrower in our time. And we're going to work to make sure that continues. In air travel, just in 3 short years, we went from observers asking if we were going to see the death of commercial aviation as we knew it during the pandemic, to some of the busiest travel seasons on record and a whole new set of problems keeping up with that demand, to now ending 2023 with the lowest cancellation rate in the last 10 years. And we did that with a lot of work within FAA and a lot of pressure on airlines, which responded to that pressure by improving. And now on the safety front, you are likewise going to see pressure on Boeing and anybody involved in manufacturing planes to make sure that they are 1,000% safe. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for roadway safety. We are finally showing signs of reversing the rise in roadway deaths, but the fact remains that we are confronting shocking numbers around the country that we've been living with for years now. And I mention this in particular here at NLC because I have been partnering with America's local leaders, and the Biden-Harris administration has been partnering with America's cities to confront that. Many of you recently received Safe Streets for All funding that you're using to save lives in your communities. And you are not just deploying federal dollars from the US DOT, but also your own political capital in order to help guide the people who trust you with their lives towards safer roadways. I'm glad you're doing that. I know it's not always an easy conversation to have, but we are here to support with everything from data and technical information to more than $1 billion in funding. It's helping. And here's something that might put a little extra spring in your step for so many of you that I know who are working on roadway safety. Last year, we reduced roadway deaths by about 1%. It's got a long way to go. That 1%, just that 1%, it's about 400 lives right there. Think about that. We rightly move heaven and earth in response to an aviation issue that could have turned into a crash. Meanwhile, for every 1% that we cut off the number of people who lose their lives in roadway crashes, we're saving 400 lives. So let's keep going and let's keep working until we reach the only acceptable level of roadway death in our communities, which is 0. There's one more area I want to make sure to mention. Every local leader understands the importance of connection. As local leaders, you are walking symbols of what people in your community, even very diverse and sometimes divided communities, all have in common. And that's what transportation is about too, symbolically and literally connecting. Local leaders understand that physical mobility is inescapably connected to social mobility, and we're here to support you in this too. We were just in a year or two ago in Orangeburg, South Carolina, where 2 HBCUs are currently cut off from the downtown business district by highways and rail tracks. So we're helping build a new pedestrian bridge and multimodal transit hub to connect them. I know that pedestrian bridges and bike lanes and potholes, to some short-sighted folks, aren't considered the most glamorous and searing issue of our time. But we know how important that is because those connections aren't just connections to the other side of town, they're connections to opportunity. And stay tuned for some very exciting news out of our Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods program later on this week that'll show just how committed this administration is to those kinds of connections. I think when we deliver on the basics, we're delivering on nothing less than the durability of our democracy, because the healthiest remaining level of our democracy is the local level. And the reason that's true is that at the local level, you are relentlessly focused on results and always thinking about how to make everyday life better. We are here to help you with that. Yes, we are with the federal government and we're here to help. But again, this time we're backing that up with the funding as well as the technical support and everything else we can do to help you thrive. So I just have 2 asks to make of you. First, continue to make the most of this generational moment by sending us great ideas and applying for programs where you have a need and reaching out to us if we can help with applying or delivering the project as well. And second, when we come together for a new project award or break ground, or best of all, cut a ribbon on a project that got done, don't be afraid to really sing from the rooftops how much that means. An individual roadway improvement might not undo decades of reduced trust, but seeing government deliver is a start, and it helps give communities confidence to keep going. So I want you to know how energized I am by the excellent and extraordinary work of America's cities, how confident I am that as challenging, troubling, and sometimes even dark as the world feels sometimes, we are going to look back with great pride on this decade and what we were able to do together. And I enjoy indulging in picturing the National League of Cities 200th anniversary, where I expect the leaders will come together and point to this era as a moment when the trajectory of American infrastructure changed for the better and positioned America to reach new heights. We are here with you every step of the way. We are thrilled to be your partners. Thank you for your great work, and thank you for the chance to join you today. Thanks very much.